up a lot. I mean, there is a whole community within the religious churches that you attend that does support you, and giving up that is difficult. It's like chopping the, well, I call it, I look at it this way. I consider those early childhood beliefs your root belief system, that they're imposed upon you, you might say, at an early age, and it's hard to chop away some of those roots that hold up the tree and replace
Well,
them with.
especially if you're being continually reinforced at a church, for instance.
Correct, right, and within your community on TV, you're just constantly hearing about religion.
Well, even in politics
And
now.
in politics,
Yes.
right, absolutely.
Yeah, everybody believes in a God. So if you walk away from that, you pretty much know as an adult, anybody over 18, that you are going to be a minority.
Right, right. And it is scary because when I left it, I did not know where to go. There was no really any real organization in terms of an atheist community like there is now.
There is a huge atheist
Right.
community in
There was very few
in the
books
US.
available on the subject, and most of those were, written for philosophers, people that had a good background in the arguments that have been made.
Well, most people don't know that even though 80% of Americans believe in a deity or a God, 80% of Europeans do not. They're just the opposite. They're very secular over there. They're very atheistic. Most Germans, Denmark, probably the most peaceful and the most atheistic countries in the world.
Right, and what's interesting is that most of the European countries are showing a very rapid decline in church attendance and participation. Some of it has to do with tax issues, especially in England. There's some kind of a tax issue with regards to whether you're part of a church or not over there. But they're selling awful lot of churches all through England and through Europe because they're just not being attended anymore.
Well, now would be a good time to let you know about how I became an atheist. And I'm actually a fairly recent conversion to strong atheism. About 2 to 3 years ago, I started reading on Islam. It was actually 9/11 that started it. I wanted to find out more about why these religious zealots decided in the name of God, which I later discovered that it was a political move that they were being used as basically God figures, God puppets in a political arena.
Well, it goes far deeper than that. Politics is an excuse. I mean, to me, it really boils down to what you're exposed to as a child. These beliefs tend to really get locked in, and they're very hard to overcome. It's like a habit. It's very hard to break habits. Believe me, it's incredibly difficult.
As a child, it was fairly easy for me not to go to church anymore. I was raised Protestant and Methodist, so I really didn't have a very good indoctrination compared to Catholic school kids because my parents were fairly secular in the home.
Right.
We really didn't pray in the home. We really didn't do any of that. And I was kind of headed away from the very beginning, even in Sunday school as a kid, trying to believe some of the stories. My wife is the same way. We started both questioning before we were 10 years old. Wait a second, how did these stories, come about? How can you explain a person going into a whale for 3 days, for instance, or Adam and Eve? Somebody was there people before Adam and Eve? All of these stories just didn't make any sense in it, and I led basically a mild atheistic life, really not espousing or advocating atheism until about 3 years ago, when I started discovering the flaws in the Bible and the flaws in Christianity in general, especially the inerrant Bible. People think, of course, the Bible has no errors, and you actually gave me a book.
That's
and it was
correct.
about 6 months ago, and it showed over 2,500 errors, contradictions, and what they call non-quotes, meaning that Paul especially did this, where he would start quoting things that are not in the Bible. And of course, if you're a believer, you just don't look for those. You simply accept that those are there. It wasn't until I actually did self-discovery. Some people would call it self-actualization, the top of the pyramid, which we'll talk about in another episode, that I finally saw the truth that not only Islam, but Christianity did not have the truths that they espouse. They did not produce any evidence that I could see. And of course, then all the ontological arguments of actual God's existence followed from that.
You have to understand, becoming an atheist is a difficult journey. And it is difficult because you generally don't have access to these problems with the Bible. The average person on the street has no idea that there are all these errors exist. There are scientific claims in the Bible that are clearly unfounded and not correct. You know, the earth is the center of the universe. Well, we know that that's not correct now. I understand why people come to believe that, and it really goes to show why the Bible was written by man. You know, the average person will, and even today, if you walk out into the street, you look around you and you watch the sun come up and the sun go down in the evening, you automatically assume that we're sitting still. And you're led to believe that it's the sun that's going around us. And of course you're going to
Well, that's what science does. And
Right.
the whole thing about science and religion, some people think they can be intertwined. I personally believe that it's religion on one end, blind faith, and science and rational thinking on the other. Because it usually took about 500 years for any of the science to actually be accepted by the church.
Correct. You know, as these shows progress, we're going to get into a lot of these issues in more detail.
That's right, we will.
You know, people don't really understand what atheism is or what an atheist believes
Well, let's
or
talk
doesn't
about that
believe.
right now. Let's
Okay.
talk about the difference between a deist and a theist and an agnostic, because we know what an atheist is. An atheist is person, and I think you might have another definition there. There's several, but my definition is one who does not believe in gods or God.
That's an atheist, correct. And I think we need to understand what atheism is by itself, and I have a small definition here. We want to try to make things very clear to people in terms of what we're talking about,
That's
what the
right.
terminology is all about, because this can be a real problem in terms of, or cause a lot of conflict if we're not on the same level with each other. Atheism is an attitude of skepticism towards the claims of the existence of any sort of God or God. We're not saying that there is not a God out there. Well, what we're saying is that there is no verifiable evidence that God exists or that we even have a need for a God based upon our understanding of the natural universe. Now, skepticism, which is crucial to atheism, is best defined as a method of thinking. And make this clear, it's a method. The original meaning of the word is to look about, to critically examine a claim, to question everything about that claim. Hopefully this examination will help us distinguish belief from knowledge, and we will talk about those two issues in a future show. You know, a skeptic is one who subscribes to the following principles. Nature is reliable, it's coherent, and the explanation is mechanistic. In other words, given the right amount of time, the right conditions, there's little doubt that we can pretty much explain everything that happens. We may not have the technology to do it today, but perhaps tomorrow we will. You know, a skeptic believes that nature operates the same throughout the universe, whether it's here on the planet Earth or if it's in across the universe on some other distant planet.
Well, that also sounds like the definition of naturalism as well.
Correct. But yeah, that's another topic that
Absolutely.
It's another
Well,
major topic.
all of these kind of intertwine over. For
Correct.
instance, most skeptics are atheists, but you don't have to be an atheist to be a skeptic. You can be a Christian skeptic. You can
Right.
not believe in UFOs or Bigfoot or homeopathy, but you could still be believing in God.
That's correct.
So continue on I know you're on a roll here.
Yeah,
so
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to go over a couple other things. You know, a lot of people don't realize that religion falls under the term of being a superstition. So we need to understand what superstition is. But basically, superstition is the frame of mind that sees significance for oneself in everyday acts of nature, and believes that the performance of some sort of ritual act will mollify whatever spirit or agency is aggravated in this instance, or in that instance. Now, basically, when you go to churches these days, there's a lot of rituals in churches. You have to go through baptism. This is a ritual. If you don't go through baptism, you can't be saved. Well, this falls under the auspices of a superstition. Catholic Church, they have their host, they have their confirmation ceremonies.
But for them, it's absolutely real.
Right.
But for other outsiders from other religions looking in,
Right.
it's
They don't
total
do that.
superstition.
Right.
Because they don't do it. So, but they have their own superstitions in their own religion.
That's correct.
The idea that Christians and Catholics go through this superstition, the superstitious behavior, and absolutely think it's real, is not the critical thinking or rational thinking that skeptics or atheists have, because they actually believe, they've been indoctrinated, that this particular ritual is real. And I think that's one part of where Christianity is becoming a much bigger part, because you can believe in your personal God, your Jesus, inside without going through those